In 1843, deep in the cotton plantations of Natchez, Mississippi, a wealthy landowner gathered 8 enslaved people at midnight for a ritual that would haunt generations. Documents discovered in a sealed trunk in 2019 revealed fragmentary references to a blood covenant and mysterious disappearances that erased entire families from plantation records. For 176 years, the truth remained buried beneath the cotton fields, until construction workers unearthed something that changed everything. This is the story of what happened that midnight in 1843, and what the earth finally revealed. Chapter 1. The Sealed Trunk. 176 years ago, in a plantation isolated in Natchez, Mississippi, county court records and damaged letters mentioned a case so disturbing that it ended up buried in silence. The Whitmore family and 8 enslaved individuals disappeared from official records between 1843 and 1844, but not from the oral memory of the community. The absence left deep scars, marking generations with a silent trauma that only now begins to be revealed. Before continuing, subscribe and activate the bell. Here we unearth secrets buried by official history and give voice to what was silenced. In March 2019, a construction crew breaking ground for a shopping center on the outskirts of Natchez struck something unexpected 15 feet below the surface. Metal objects, human remains, and a sealed iron trunk corroded by time. Inside that trunk, protected by wax and cloth, were documents that should never have survived. A landowner's journal, letters written in cipher, and a list of 8 names with dates beside them. All from 1843. The discovery triggered an investigation that would consume historians for months. The trunk belonged to Samuel Whitmore, owner of one of the largest cotton plantations in Adams County, a respected man, church deacon, father of 4 legitimate children. But the documents painted a different picture, one of obsession, forbidden control, and a midnight ritual that bound 8 people to a fate worse than slavery itself. The journal began normally enough. Plantation accounts, cotton yields, weather observations. But starting in January 1843, the entries changed. Whitmore wrote about bloodlines, about preserving pure stock, about the need for absolute loyalty beyond death. He mentioned consulting with other landowners about a solution to what he called the problem of continuation. The writings became increasingly cryptic, referencing ancient pacts and the necessity of willing sacrifice. Then came the entry dated March 15, 1843. Tonight, at midnight, 8 will pledge. The covenant will be sealed in blood and earth. They understand what must be done. The future of the line depends on their willingness. The list found with the journal provided the names Sarah, age 28, James, age 35, Ruth, age 19, Moses, age 42, Hannah, age 16, Thomas, age 31, Dinah, age 24, Samuel, the younger, age 38. 8 people whose lives Whitmore controlled completely. 8 people who, according to the journal, consented to the covenant. But what was this covenant? And what did Whitmore mean by sealed in blood and earth? The historians cross-referenced plantation records, church registries, and county documents. All 8 names appeared in Whitmore's property ledgers through March 1843. After that date, they vanished. No sales recorded, no deaths registered, no transfers to other plantations, simply erased from official existence. Local oral histories, preserved through generations of descendants, told of a night when screams echoed from the cotton fields, of torches burning in a circle, of people who were never seen again, but whose voices, some claimed, could still be heard on certain nights when the wind moved through the abandoned fields. The sealed trunk contained one more item, a small leather pouch with soil inside, soil mixed with something dark and dried. Laboratory analysis in 2019 confirmed human blood, 8 different DNA profiles mixed together with the earth. Chapter 2. The Whitmore Empire. To understand what happened that midnight in 1843, we must first understand Samuel Whitmore and the world he controlled. Born in 1795 to a merchant family in Natchez, Whitmore inherited his father's plantation in 1820. By 1840, he owned 847 acres of prime Mississippi Delta cotton land and held 143 people in bondage. His plantation, called Oakwood, produced 400 bales of cotton annually, a fortune that placed him among the wealthiest men in the county. But Whitmore's obsession went beyond wealth. Letters preserved in county archives reveal a man consumed with lineage, with genetic control, with creating what he called a perfected workforce that would remain loyal across generations. He corresponded with other plantation owners about breeding programs, about selecting specific individuals for reproduction, about eliminating those who showed defiance in blood. This was the dark reality of slavery's evil science, treating human beings as livestock, controlling their bodies, their children, their very existence. Whitmore took it further. He believed he could create absolute loyalty through ritual, through psychological binding that went beyond physical chains. The journal entries from 1842 reveal his preparation. He studied what he called old covenants, likely twisted interpretations of biblical texts mixed with folklore. He consulted with a preacher from Louisiana who supposedly knew rituals of binding and blood oaths. He selected 8 individuals from his enslaved population based on criteria he never fully explained: age, health, family ties, and something he referred to as spiritual susceptibility. Sarah was a field worker whose 3 children had already been sold away. James was a skilled carpenter who had attempted escape twice. Ruth was pregnant with her first child. Moses was the oldest enslaved person on the plantation, a man who had survived the Middle Passage and watched his entire African family die. Hannah was barely more than a child, torn from her mother 6 months earlier. Thomas had killed an overseer in self-defense and was awaiting execution. Dinah was a house servant who had witnessed too many of Whitmore's secrets. Samuel the younger was Whitmore's own son, born to an enslaved woman he had forced himself upon for years. 8 people, 8 different stories of suffering, 8 lives. Whitmore believed he could bind forever to his will. The preparation took months. Whitmore cleared a section of the cotton fields, creating a circle of stones marked with symbols. He obtained iron collars inscribed with words no one could later decipher. He drafted a document, found in the trunk, that read like a contract but was really a declaration of ownership that extended beyond mortal life and into the continuation of the Whitmore line. Other plantation owners knew something was happening. Letters between Whitmore and 3 neighboring landowners, Robert Hastings, Charles Dunmore, and William Prescott, suggested they supported whatever he planned. One letter from Hastings, dated February 1843, stated, "If your experiment succeeds, we must all adopt the method. The problem of rebellion ends when the spirit itself is bound." They called it an experiment, a solution, a method, never mentioning that it involved human beings, human suffering, human lives. As March 15, 1843 approached, the 8 individuals selected for the covenant were separated from the rest of the enslaved community. They were held in isolation, given specific foods, the journal mentions bread and bitter herbs, and subjected to what Whitmore called preparation through instruction and fasting. The community watched in terror. Oral histories describe the fear that permeated Oakwood that March. No one knew exactly what Whitmore planned, but everyone sensed something terrible was coming. Parents held their children closer. People whispered prayers in the quarters. And on the night of March 15th, when torches were lit in the cotton fields, many hid and tried not to hear what followed. Chapter 3. The Midnight Covenant. Midnight, March 15th, 1843. The moon hung full over the Mississippi cotton fields, casting shadows that seemed to writhe between the rows. 8 people stood in a circle of stones, torches burning at cardinal points, Samuel Whitmore at the center holding a Bible in one hand and a blade in the other. What happened next comes from fragments, Whitmore's journal entries, oral histories passed down through generations, and the physical evidence unearthed 176 years later. No one will ever know the complete truth, but the pieces form a picture dark enough to haunt anyone who studies it. The 8 were brought to the circle wearing iron collars. Whitmore had 3 overseers present, armed and watching the perimeter. But according to his journal, the 8 came willingly, understanding the covenant. This claim is impossible to verify and almost certainly a lie. How could anyone enslaved truly consent to anything their enslaver demanded? Whitmore read from the document, declaring that these 8 would be bound to him and his descendants in this life and beyond, that their labor and loyalty would continue through their children and their children's children. He claimed they would be rewarded with protection, with survival, with the certainty that their families would never be sold away. It was a twisted bargain, a false promise made by a man who held absolute power over people who had no power at all. Then came the blood. Each of the 8 had their hands cut, deep enough to bleed but not to kill. The blood was collected in a bowl, mixed with soil from the cotton fields, and spread on the stones marking the circle. Whitmore cut his own hand and added his blood to the mixture, declaring a bond between master and enslaved that would transcend death. The ritual continued for hours. Prayers were chanted. The collars were sealed with wax bearing Whitmore's family crest. Each person was forced to drink a mixture. The journal doesn't specify what, but mentions herbs for binding and remembrance. Then they were led one by one to the center of the circle and made to stand over a pit that had been dug in the earth. Here the journal becomes fragmented. Whitmore wrote about the sealing and the descent and voices pledging eternal service. He mentioned that by dawn, the covenant was complete and the 8 had fulfilled their purpose. After that night, none of the 8 were ever seen again. The enslaved community at Oakwood whispered that they heard digging throughout that night, that the pit in the cotton field was filled before sunrise, that Whitmore and his overseers returned to the main house covered in dirt and blood. Some claimed they heard voices calling from beneath the earth for weeks afterward. Others said the cotton that grew over that spot was stained darker than the rest, as if the soil itself remembered. Official records show nothing. No deaths registered, no sales documented. 8 human beings simply erased from existence as if they had never lived at all. But the land remembers. The earth holds its secrets until the right moment. Now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this story. I want to know how far these silenced accounts reach. Chapter 4. The Silence and the Rumors. For 176 years, the official story was simple. Nothing happened. 8 enslaved people were sold to traders heading west, their names lost in incomplete records, their fates unknown. The Whitmore family thrived. The cotton plantation continued producing wealth, and nobody asked too many questions about a midnight ritual in March 1843. But silence is never truly silent. It echoes through generations, leaving marks that descendants carry without knowing why. The enslaved community at Oakwood knew something terrible had happened. They knew because they had lived with the 8, had loved them, had shared quarters and work and suffering with them. They knew because Sarah's children, sold away before the ritual, would spend their lives searching for a mother who had vanished. They knew because Moses's wife went mad with grief, screaming his name in the fields until overseers beat her unconscious. The knowledge was passed down in whispers. Great-grandmothers told great-granddaughters about the night of fire in the cotton fields, about the screams that couldn't be screams, because the next morning Whitmore claimed nothing had happened. About the pit that appeared and was filled before dawn, about the spot where cotton grew darker and workers refused to pick, claiming the plants felt wrong to touch. White families in Natchez knew something too. They knew because Samuel Whitmore changed after March 1843. Letters from that period describe him as consumed by religious fervor, and speaking often of blood covenants and eternal bonds. He began attending church twice daily, as if seeking absolution for something. He stopped socializing with other plantation owners except for Hastings, Dunmore, and Prescott, the 3 who had encouraged his experiment. In 1847, just 4 years after the Midnight Covenant, Samuel Whitmore was found dead in the cotton fields. Officially, the cause was recorded as heart failure, but oral histories tell a different story. That he was discovered in the center of the stone circle, his body twisted as if in agony, his hands clutching at his throat, his eyes wide with terror. That he had been digging at the earth with his bare hands, his fingernails torn and bloody. Some claimed he was trying to unearth something. Others said he was trying to escape something that had finally come for him. The 3 other plantation owners involved in the covenant all died within 10 years, each in circumstances described vaguely in official records: sudden illness, accident in the fields, unexplained death. Their families spoke of nightmares, of voices calling their names, of feeling watched whenever they walked through cotton fields. The Whitmore plantation passed to Samuel's eldest legitimate son, Thomas Whitmore, who immediately sold the property and moved to New Orleans. The new owners, the Morrison family, reported strange occurrences from the beginning: enslaved workers refusing to work a specific section of the cotton field, claiming they heard voices, animals avoiding the area, crops that grew twisted and dark in a perfect circle. In 1859, the Morrison family attempted to level the section and plant it fresh. Workers digging discovered what they described as iron and bone 15 feet below the surface. The discovery was quickly covered up. The Morrisons ordered the pit filled with concrete and planted trees over it, declaring the land cursed and unsuitable for cotton. When the Civil War came in 1861, Oakwood Plantation was abandoned. The main house burned during occupation by Union troops in 1863. The fields were divided and sold after the war. Freed people who had been enslaved at Oakwood spoke of the blood ground in the South Field, where cotton had once grown dark and where no one would walk after sunset. County records from Reconstruction mention the land only once: an 1872 legal dispute over property boundaries in which one witness referred to the sealed ground where old Whitmore made his devil's bargain. The reference was struck from official testimony but remained in the court clerk's notes. By 1900, the entire area had been subdivided and sold to small farmers. None farmed the specific section where the stone circle had been. It remained overgrown, avoided, spoken of in hushed tones by people who didn't fully know why they feared it. Throughout the 20th century, the story faded. The oral histories remained within families descended from those who had been enslaved at Oakwood, but even those grew fragmentary with each generation. By 2000, most people in Natchez had never heard of Samuel Whitmore or the Covenant. The land where Oakwood had stood was scheduled for development: a shopping center, parking lots, modern commerce built over buried history. Chapter 5: What the Earth Revealed. March 2019. A backhoe operator named Marcus Thompson broke ground for a shopping center development on the old Oakwood plantation site. 15 feet down, his blade struck something solid. Metal screamed against metal. He shut down the machine and climbed into the excavation to investigate. What he found would change everything. The backhoe had torn open an iron structure buried deep in the Mississippi soil. Inside were human remains, not one set, not two, but multiple skeletons arranged in a circle. All bore marks of violence: collars still locked around neck bones, wrist shackles corroded but intact, evidence of cuts and breaks that told stories of suffering. Thompson called the county sheriff. The sheriff called the state archaeologist. Within hours, the construction site became a forensic excavation, and within days it became a national news story. The remains told a story that official records had tried to erase. 8 individuals, buried together in an iron chamber 15 feet underground. Each skeleton showed evidence of trauma. Each wore restraints that should never have been on human beings, and each was positioned facing inward, toward a central point where something had once stood, now gone, but leaving a mark in the earth like a burn. The sealed trunk was discovered 3 feet from the iron chamber. Inside were Samuel Whitmore's journal, the encoded letters, the covenant document, and the pouch of blood-mixed soil. Together they provided evidence of what had happened that midnight in 1843. Not complete evidence, but enough to reconstruct the horror. Dr. Rachel Morrison, the forensic anthropologist assigned to the case, spent 6 months examining the remains. Her report, released in October 2019, was devastating in its conclusions. These 8 individuals died on or around the same night. All show evidence of blood loss consistent with ritual cutting. Several show signs of suffocation or live burial. The manner of death for all 8 is consistent with murder, not natural causes or accident. The burial method, deep underground in a sealed chamber, suggests intentional concealment and ritualistic practice. DNA analysis identified 2 of the 8. Descendants of Sarah and Moses had submitted DNA to ancestry databases years earlier, never knowing what they would help discover. The matches confirmed family oral histories that had been dismissed for generations. Sarah's great-great-great-granddaughter, Angela Harris, learned that her ancestor hadn't been sold away as family legend claimed. She had died in a midnight ritual, her life taken by a man who believed he had the right to sacrifice human beings for his own twisted purposes. For 176 years, we thought she had survived somewhere, had lived a life even if we didn't know where, Harris told reporters. Now we know she died here, in this field, murdered and buried like she was nothing. But she was something. She was our ancestor. She deserves to be remembered. Moses's descendants, the Freeman family, had preserved a song passed down for 6 generations. The lyrics spoke of grandfather Moses who walked into fire and never came out, who sleeps in the cotton ground waiting for freedom. They had thought it was metaphorical. Now they knew it was literal documentation of murder. The discovery triggered a criminal investigation, though no one could be prosecuted 176 years after the crime. Historians combed through archives, finding documents that had been overlooked or deliberately hidden. Letters between plantation owners discussing binding rituals and blood experiments. Church records showing that Samuel Whitmore had consulted with a preacher about sacred covenants and sacrifices for prosperity. The other 6 individuals remained unidentified, their DNA matching no one in existing databases. They became symbolic of all the people whose names were stolen by slavery, whose lives ended in unmarked graves, whose stories history tried to erase. The Natchez community responded with a mixture of horror, denial, and eventual acknowledgement. Some white residents claimed the story was exaggerated, that there must be another explanation. But the evidence was overwhelming. The bones didn't lie. The documents didn't lie. The earth, after 176 years of silence, finally spoke truth. Chapter 6. Memory and Justice. A memorial stands today where 8 people died in 1843. Not a shopping center. The development was canceled after the discovery, the land purchased by a coalition of historical societies and descendant families. The memorial consists of 8 granite markers arranged in a circle, each bearing a name for those identified, and the words unknown but not forgotten for those who remain nameless. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the story of these 8 people reach more people. Every March 15th at midnight, descendants gather at the memorial. They light candles, speak the names of Sarah and Moses, and honor the 6 whose names were stolen. They read letters found in the trunk, documents that reveal the horror of what happened. They sing songs passed down through generations, songs that kept memory alive when official history tried to erase it. The discovery in 2019 triggered a broader reckoning with Natchez's past. Other plantation sites were investigated. Other records were examined. More unmarked graves were found. More stories of violence emerged. The city commissioned a comprehensive study of slavery in Adams County, resulting in a 400-page report documenting systematic abuse, murder, and concealment that had been denied for 150 years. The Whitmore family descendants responded differently. Some issued apologies acknowledging their ancestors' crimes and supporting the memorial. Others remained silent. A few contested the findings, claiming the evidence was circumstantial. But the weight of history was undeniable. Samuel Whitmore had murdered 8 people in a ritual designed to bind them in servitude beyond death, and the earth had held that secret until truth could finally emerge. Dr. Morrison's forensic report concluded with words that resonated across the country. These 8 individuals were denied justice in their lives, denied proper burial in their deaths, and denied remembrance for 176 years. We cannot undo those injustices, but we can ensure their story is told, their names are spoken, and their humanity is recognized. They were not property. They were people: Sarah, Moses, Ruth, James, Hannah, Thomas, Dinah, and Samuel. They lived, they suffered, they died, and now finally, they are remembered. The sealed trunk and its contents are displayed in the Natchez Historical Museum, in a permanent exhibit about slavery and its hidden horrors. Visitors can read Whitmore's journal, with appropriate warnings about disturbing content, and see the covenant document that claimed ownership of human souls. They can see the iron collars, the shackles, the evidence of a crime that should never have happened. Educational programs now teach students about the blood covenant, about systematic violence, about the importance of preserving oral histories that official records try to erase. Sarah's descendants work with schools across Mississippi, ensuring that new generations understand what happened when human beings were treated as property, when lives could be taken in midnight rituals, when power was absolute and unchecked. The cotton fields where Oakwood Plantation once stood are now native grassland, allowed to return to natural state. No crops grow there. No development disturbs the earth. It stands as sacred ground, a place where 8 people died and where 176 years later, truth finally broke through centuries of silence. Some nights people claim they hear voices carried on the wind across those fields. Not screams anymore, but something else. Songs, perhaps, or prayers. Maybe it's imagination. Maybe it's the wind itself. Or maybe, some say, it's the sound of 8 souls, finally free, their stories told, their names remembered, their deaths acknowledged. The land remembers. The earth holds its secrets until the right moment, and when truth emerges, it demands we listen, we learn, and we ensure that such horrors never happen again. Subscribe to the channel to discover more forbidden and forgotten stories. Thank you for following the case of the Natchez Blood Covenant. See you in the next video. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Memory survives when records fail. The earth speaks truth that silence tried to bury.